Hello and welcome to SSRF's Spiritual Research Series. To find answers to questions such as, how was the universe created? Scientists recently performed a huge experiment in Switzerland that aimed to recreate events just after the so-called Big Bang. On 4th July 2012, they announced that they had found the elusive Higgs boson particle, referred to by some as the God particle. On 5th July 2012, some seekers of SSRF saw dazzling golden particles that fell from the hands of His Holiness Dr. Athavale, a saint of the highest order. These were divine particles of divine consciousness, or Chaitanya. A seeker is a person who does regular spiritual practice for God realization. Later, many seekers in many ashrams associated with SSRF and many seekers staying at home all over the world also found such dazzling divine particles on their body and also in their homes. Thus, they could receive the spiritual experience of divine particles firsthand. An ashram is a place where a seeker can remain engrossed in spiritual practice with spiritual discipline. Actually, the golden divine particles were first seen on both hands of His Holiness Dr. Athavale on 28th March 2012 in sunlight. SSRF did spiritual research on these divine particles. They were analyzed by seekers using advanced sixth sense. We received information on when and why these divine particles became apparent on His Holiness Dr. Athavale's body. We also came to know that seekers were able to see divine particles at home due to the resolve of His Holiness Dr. Athavale. We understood the various aspects about the particles. Before going any further, let us understand the unique characteristics of His Holiness Dr. Athavale. The Upanishads are one of the oldest holy texts in the world, which states that the primary signs of a spiritually evolved person are lightness of body, good health, lustrous skin, excellent voice, fragrance, and limited urine and stools. Almost all these signs are seen in regards to the body of His Holiness Dr. Athavale. Various fragrances emanate from His Holiness Dr. Athavale's body and objects used by him. As his speech emanates divine consciousness, spiritual healing takes place on seekers with distress due to negative energies. Changes have been seen in his nails in stages such as yellow coloration indicative of a Dnyanyogi. A Dnyanyogi is one who follows the spiritual path of knowledge. Later there was white coloration of nails indicative of renunciation and their transparency indicative of peace. Some of his hair has turned completely golden. His skin is becoming transparent. His Holiness Dr. Athavale's characteristics are his intense curiosity and the quality of sharing his learnings with others. They are a reflection of his underlying thought for the welfare of mankind through this knowledge. His Holiness Dr. Athavale found the reason underlying the physical changes in him through divine knowledge. Some seekers of SSRF receive divine knowledge. There is surprising similarity in the information obtained through this knowledge and the progressive physical changes that took place later in His Holiness Dr. Athavale. This shows the genuineness of the knowledge and the reason underlying the changes. Let us now see the subtle characteristics of golden divine particles found on His Holiness Dr. Athavale's hand. The subtle or spiritual dimension is beyond the five senses, mind, and intellect. It is studied using the sixth sense. We will study the subtle characteristics of the divine particles with the help of a picture. The picture is based on subtle knowledge received by our seeker with advanced sixth sense, Mrs. Athavale. An activated ring of God principle is created in the divine particles. Then, a ring of bliss activated in radiant form is created in them. Particles of bliss are emitted by them into the environment. A flow of non-materialized divine consciousness is attracted to His Holiness Dr. Athavale's hand and towards the particles on his hand. Further, an activated ring of non-materialized divine consciousness is created in the particles. Then, a ring of non-materialized divine consciousness is emitted by the particles into the environment in a radiant form. Lastly, activated non-materialized divine consciousness is created around His Holiness Dr. Athavale's hand. This non-materialized divine consciousness afterwards materialized in divine particles. The divine particles are laden with divine consciousness and enrich the environment with it. These divine particles are aiding the spiritual progress of seekers. Negative energies possessing some seekers manifested and started shouting upon seeing the divine particles as they were distressed because of these particles. Other seekers experienced spiritual healing. Seekers also received positive spiritual experiences such as fragrance, coolness, and calmness upon looking at these particles. These points are indicative of the divinity in the divine particles. Seekers received these experiences as a result of doing spiritual practice with faith in God. We will learn more about the divine particles in the next video on this topic. For further details on spiritual practice, please contact us at www.ssrf.org. That's all we have for you in this episode. Goodbye for now.